Everyone. I'm recording not from my regular studio. Unfortunately, due to the current situation, I am out of the house. But I'm very happy to be joined this week for his second act on Beyond the Code by Justin Wales, who's head of legal for the Americas at Crypto.com. And more importantly, he's the author of the Crypto Legal Handbook, of which I'm a huge fan. And now version 2 of the Crypto Legal Handbook, which can be bought on Amazon and is a fantastic read and an absolute must for anybody who's looking to get into the crypto legal world, or anybody who's already in it and just wants to make some sense of things and enjoy a good read. I highly recommend. Enjoy this episode with Justin and I. Welcome to Beyond the Code, the podcast where industry experts and brilliant legal minds discuss the impact of new emerging technologies. I'm your host, Yitzy Hammer, a lawyer and tech enthusiast. Join us as we explore the legal, regulatory, and ethical issues surrounding AI, blockchain, and more. Get ready to go beyond the code and stay ahead of the game.
Hey, how are you?
Hey, man.
Hey, good to see you.
I went to grab my book.
Oh, yeah. Got the orange version now.
I wore an orange shirt to celebrate.
Ah, cool.
Looking good.
How are you? Good, yeah, good.
I think your beard got a little fuller since the last time we spoke.
It ebbs and flows. You've been traveling quite a bit, right?
Yeah, it's hard to be like a global crypto lawyer if you don't go around the globe, constantly trying to prove to people that I'm not like a random guy living in a shack in Israel. So it helps.
See, I try to avoid traveling as much as I can.
Traveling and people, I hear you.
Yeah.
You're a recluse. How's it going? How's the new book? Did you get any feedback yet?
Yeah, I mean, it's all very positive. So, it's an update of the last version. So we I think like we had like created a bit of an infrastructure with different law firms and libraries and schools who are purchasing it. So I think so far it's just gotten into people's hands like the last like week or so, but everyone's been very positive about it. And then I think we'll see like quite a large number of purchases with the fall semester coming up. So like most of the schools aren't buying them until a little later in the summer, so they're in the libraries. But so far, pretty positive.
Yeah. I will tell you that I have a summer intern who started last week, and on his first day, I bought him the new version of the book.
Oh, cool.
And I think he's done by now, but when he was like 100 pages in, he's like, this is fantastic. He didn't know very much about crypto beforehand, and he's pre-law, so he hasn't even gotten his feet wet legally yet. But he's like, this is just giving him a full scope. So definitely a good place to start from.
Yeah, what's interesting is like there's like a huge number of folks who have bought it and have given me feedback who are non-US lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been surprised by how many folks from around the world are like have an interest in like crypto law generally, but US specific crypto law. And from the conversations, it's all of their regulators basically follow our securities rules and look at like what we're doing, right? So they view this as necessary for their own practice.
The magnum opus of crypto law, as it were. Actually, I had Hester Peirce on a few months ago, I guess now, and I told her that I was really angry at the previous administration's SEC because as a non-US person, our regulators are incredibly uncreative and are just looking towards the West and waiting for the US to come out with some kind of like clear guidelines or something. And until they do that, they're not willing to budge. So they kind of dropped the ball there, but thankfully they're picking up the pieces. It's good to see. I'm curious, obviously, to hear your thoughts if you're still bullish, even though Elon and Trump are throwing stuff at each other.
It's like watching your parents fight, right?
True that. So catch me up. What's been going on other than the book, which I also want to dive a bit more into, understand like what the new chapters are covering, if you've gone outside of the scope of the US at all, but also just what's been going on with you generally. I don't know to what extent you could talk about your operations in the company, like how you guys have been looking at expansion and just generally like taking maybe a different risk approach to your North American activities. I'd be very, very interested to hear.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'll answer like the first is like, well, where are we
Well, I just
now
remind
versus
also
what
everybody who's listening that you are head of the Americas. Is that your official title?
head of legal for the
Legal
Americas. Yeah. So basically
legal
the
for the Americas
like most of the Western hemisphere I'm overseeing. Look, I mean,
at crypto.com.
at crypto.com, like you said, the biggest update in the last year and just generally in crypto law is there's been a change of administration, right? And we came from one that was really antagonistic in like sort of an interesting way. Because usually you think that someone's going to be antagonistic because they're going to affirmatively try to create laws against you. They're going to try to create regulations against you. They have a philosophy that they're trying to like push forward. But this was kind of weaponizing ambiguity. And they were saying, well, all of the crypto industry is regulated by securities rules. And when this industry says, well, how is this applied to us? What do we do if we want to register with you? How do we move forward with this? The answer for many years has been, we're not telling you. We're just going to sue you and let the courts settle it. And I think that's really the biggest change of perspective is right now you have an SEC who says, well, maybe there are some ambiguous provisions of the securities rules that we want to think more about, and they're going to be roundtables on it. We're going to have discussions with it, but what we're not going to do is we're not just going to take a position and try to sue our philosophy into existence, and we're going to try to be a little more collaborative. How did this manifest is all of the major lawsuits that the SEC brought against platforms for selling what they deemed unregistered securities have now been dropped. There are roundtables, there are requests for information from the industry and a repository of information that their SEC is collecting that tries to dive deep into all of these different areas of interest from the SEC in terms of where do the digital asset space and the securities rules intersect. And then separately from that, you have a pretty significant effort to pass market structure legislation that will try to clear up the rules in Congress. So all of that has manifested into my book in many, many, many chapters, right? Because we have basically every updates for every case that the SEC has brought, updates in some of the politics and the policies that have been promoted both by the SEC and by Congress and the industry, and really trying to like have this book read as if it was written today for this moment. And one thing that I dislike when I read sort of updated textbooks is it feels like someone wrote it a long time ago, and then there's a paragraph at the end of each chapter saying, and here's why everything you just read is different. So what I did in the new one is I tried to go through and say, okay, what if I had to write this from, you know, the beginnings of the Trump administration and as a holdover from the Biden administration, and how would it look? And the result is like quite a lot of revisions and readjustments of how the story of crypto law is presented. Because again, like I want someone like your intern or a law student to read this and get a sense for what it was like now without having to like dive through all these war stories that might not be actually relevant to the current analysis.
I do feel that way, that you read these like new versions of old books and it just feels that you're reading something that's completely outdated, and then there's like a paragraph at the end that's like, oh, and by the way.
There's an interesting thing that happens with that, which is like I know a lot of folks who have written textbooks or written treatises that get updated every year, and they put a huge amount of effort into it, and then they sort of treat it like an annuity, which is okay, you're going to sell like a certain amount each year just because you have like this infrastructure built, but you've already gotten all the clout you're going to get from being like the person who wrote it. So what do you end up doing? You end up getting a bunch of interns, you end up getting summer associates, you end up getting people to just do it, and you become like more and more checked out. And the result is like, I mean, I remember like I used to update this one on Florida civil procedure when I was a young associate. The guy who wrote it just like was completely checked out, and you would read it and it was like complete crap because every
Who the
year
hell are
someone
you?
would cut. Yeah, well, it was like every year someone would like update it, but there would be like the citations would be different, or like the style would be different, and you would just read like a Frankenstein. So I really had that one in mind when I was writing this, and said, okay, how do I make it? Try to make it like a good resource for 2025 instead of just an easy check because I already wrote it and now it's just a different cover.
So I would say again, thank you for your service. You have done a tremendous service for the crypto community. Okay, so let's just talk for 1 second about like your professional perspective on the industry. I think it was after we recorded our podcast that you guys got hit with the Wells notice. I think it was like towards the end of last year, correct? And then like it was nothing new under the sun. Everybody who was anybody in the space was getting one, so I guess you probably felt validated in a sense. But then again, like a few months ago, you guys got a no action letter from the new SEC the SEC and the new administration. So that also must have felt good. Like what did it look like internally, like being leading a legal department that was being hit with all these big bludgeons?
So
not knowing like how to respond because there isn't necessarily like a right answer there.
yeah, I mean, we were in an interesting position because we had in time we were much further along than the Coinbase and the Binance cases, which were started much earlier. So practically speaking, those cases, even if the Biden administration or the Harris administration continued and we would have gotten sued. We never got sued, but we would have gotten sued. A large part of our case would have probably already been determined just based on what the appellate decisions in Binance and Coinbase and Kraken and sort of these other ones that were in the air. So we were in sort of an interesting position where we were just like spending a lot of time waiting. Yeah, watching and waiting and reading the papers and kind of thinking about it. We ended up being a bit proactive after we got our Wells notice and we filed a lawsuit in Texas against the SEC, basically saying that the SEC's perspective that all of these assets, and they kind of had this unnamed category of crypto asset securities, were basically a new category of securities that were governed by the Securities Act, that perspective and the way they were enforcing it was really a rule that they created. And that has to go through the Administrative Procedures Act. So we filed this sort of wonky federal suit against the SEC. That never ended up having to get fully litigated because the new administration came. We received our closing letter. But if you want to see like what our perspective was and what our game plan was, I mean, you could pull those briefs, and it was essentially just to make the argument that others had also made, which is the SEC is really acting extrajudicially. They don't have clear guidance. They're trying to like fit the guidance that they do have into an argument that would basically capture the entire industry. And in order to do that, you really have to go through a process, and the Administrative Procedures Act is really there to create that process. And to the SEC's credit, under this new administration, they are going through guidance. And whatever the market structure bill, if it does get passed, but whatever version of it, there will be like quite a lot of rulemaking that needs to happen from this SEC and probably the CFTC as well. And that will also go through this process that requires notice, it requires comment from the public, a collaboration between the industry and the regulators. So we're seeing essentially what we wanted to happen in the last administration happening right now. Just we just needed a change in administration, frankly, to get it there.
Again, I'm bullish. Let's hope that things continue in the right direction.
So here's can I tell you why I'm a bit bullish and maybe also a little apprehensive, which is
please.
So when did you first start getting like into this whole crypto space?
Like seriously in 2017. We got hit with a lot of ICOs at our firm.
So 2016, 2017 is like the latest of like remembering like the good times, which is you probably remember this, right? People would call you and they'd be, coming from other companies, they'd be established like developers, really smart folks, people who work at research facilities, people who are graduating from the world's best colleges. And they'd say, I really want to build this decentralized product, or I want to do something in this space. And there was just so much like mental energy coming into crypto, right? Some of it was because they wanted to create a token and they wanted to like make a lot of money, but a lot of it was, there's this interesting decentralized structure that I can utilize for all sorts of things. So you were seeing people saying, I want to create the new Ethereum. I want to create a platform for speech, for social media, for record keeping, all these things. And what the SEC over the last several years has done is it basically said, if you have any ambition whatsoever, we are going to sue you into personal oblivion. We're going to make your life hell. So what ends up happening is like if you talk to people right now at the best colleges, at like, research facilities, where do they want to work? Mostly not in crypto. They want to work in AI. They want to work in like biopharmaceuticals. They want to work in machine learning. These types of like other types of interests. And my hope is that with this new administration and this philosophy that they're trying to put out, which is basically it is possible to create a system that has a token without you personally being accused of like violating securities rules. Now, we don't know exactly what that looks like yet. Hopefully, it gets more of that like mental energy back into the crypto industry, and we'll start seeing like really interesting developments. For the last year and a half, 2 years, where have like the biggest projects been? It's been NFTs, it's been meme coins. Now, what is interesting about those two projects is that they're sort of low ambition projects, right? The NFTs are okay, they're collectibles, but like they're interesting because they exist as collectibles. Meme coins are affinity
Memes.
coins, but like all they do is exist and they can be traded. There's very little that's being
Actual
built right
value
now
that they bring. Yeah.
or interest, like they're trying to build something that can actually be used more than just as a thing to be traded on a market.
I see it a little differently than you do. You have a very North American perspective on the market. What you mentioned in that the difficult position that crypto in the US was in caused people to just like shut down and say, okay, I don't want to work in this industry. You know, all these brilliant minds that had all these great ideas, but were being shut down because they were being sued into oblivion. And they went on to bigger and better things. As a lawyer working in the crypto industry outside of the US, what I saw is all those people that you mentioned that were like running off into other industries actually just coming abroad. And they were still building in the industry. They just weren't doing it in their own backyard. What I think is going to be really interesting now is we have all these clients who have been doing whatever they can to avoid the US, who are saying like, screw it, why do I have to now go like operate this way just to avoid the SEC and to avoid the US regulators? Now I want to come and pluck my flag down. And so they're not exactly there yet, but everybody is saying like we want to start, sussing this out and see how we can do it. I think we're going to see a lot more innovation from outside the US coming and looking to build a presence within the US. And also, I think we're going to see a lot more brains within the US that were less inclined to operate within the crypto space coming out, like you said, and either innovating or joining companies and bringing their brains there.
I mean, I have a very North American perspective, but I think the industry as a whole is better off when you can build a product overseas and you can sell it to folks in the US, and the US folks can build a product here and sell it to people around the world. So I think that's the disconnect that we're trying to solve right now. And I think the current SEC understands that, that there's some value to that, and a value to the US, frankly, in being able to cultivate these types of
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I had a whole other direction I wanted to go with you, but threw me off 1 second. What was I thinking? Well, what are you excited about? What are you excited about in the industry? Like what I know that you guys are like just look at money. I mean, you're an exchange ultimately.
yeah.
But like on the innovation side, like what things that you see are you seeing that are being built that you're excited about?
I can think of a couple things. Is like one is what is a prolonged period of the.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to there?
Yeah, you can keep going and we'll get
Okay,
back to it.
what is a prolonged period of folks being able to build without fear and without having to sort of hide what they're doing look like, and how does that manifest? I think we cannot actually predict what is going to be built, and that's fun again. Whereas for the last couple of
Yeah.
years, you kind of felt like, okay, maybe all the interesting things have already been built, and now crypto is going to sort of develop slower than other moves of technology. But the other thing is that like we're seeing traditional finance try to get more into crypto. We're seeing crypto companies get more into traditional finance. So the question for me has always been, what happens first? Do all these crypto companies essentially become banks, or do the banks become crypto companies? And I think we're seeing that race begin to start. Um, the Trump administration has started to announce that they're taking the shackles off of national banks from being able to custody crypto and potentially offer it, but they haven't really gotten into that space yet. So that's, to me, is interesting. And it's also interesting to see, like, well, how does crypto play into things like AI, right? I think there's like quite a bit of overlap between AI and crypto that is just beginning to be explored and will continue to move forward. And I talk about this in the book, and I add an AI chapter in the book. But I sort of have a theory that, like, when all is said and done, outside of maybe like Bitcoin and stablecoin, it's possible that most of crypto is like a footnote of what AI looks like in the future. And we're just playing our small part in like a much bigger story. And that's sort of interesting and exciting to me.
On that note, I will say, small plug, my previous guest, which launched this morning, is a Australian crypto lawyer who launched an AI for crypto lawyers, and it's phenomenal. It's like
I saw you
$25
post
a month.
about that. Yeah, I haven't looked at it. I saw that there was a
You need to give
discount
it a
code.
shot. Take it for a 7-day free trial spin. Like,
What's it called? Kathy? Is that right?
It's called Crystal.
Crystal.
And it's like, it's basically like ChatGPT is not good for our purposes because A, you can't share confidential information, and
Mhm.
B, it doesn't know what we need it to know. So this is basically ChatGPT, like the interface and the speed and everything is the same, except it's geared and trained on models specifically focused on crypto law and regulation, and you don't have to worry about the input. So I highly recommend.
Yeah, I'll check it out. I put together like my own GPT on ChatGPT, that I uploaded the manuscript of this book as well as like several notes and other documents, and it's pretty good. It's kind of like chatting with
Okay.
the book. Um, you still have the same like privacy concerns of, any ChatGPT log, but you can find it on OpenAI right now for free, and it's sort of like a fun way of doing like a search of the most promising information for this book. But it messes up a little bit. It still messes up a
Yeah,
little.
it's AI. It's not perfect.
Yeah,
Fantastic. Okay, this is what I want to talk to you about.
yeah,
LinkedIn. Okay, you say some stuff, and you've got quite a bit to say about the traditional law world. None of it good, I might add. And that's, I mean, as an ex big law guy, I pretty much
yeah.
resonate with most of what you say. Like, what kind of feedback do you get on, I mean, again, totally resonate, but there's still
Yeah.
like some tens of thousands of like big law lawyers out there, many of whom follow you. I wonder if like anybody ever writes to you personally and just is like, wow, man, like you totally get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all been very positive. I mean, the whole thing with like LinkedIn is sort of interesting because it's like, I would say, as close to 100% positive feedback as you can get while posting online. And maybe it's like self-selecting, and that the people who like end up following me are interested in that. But like big law is an interesting thing because like everyone who is in big law knows that there are problems with it, and they think that they are the exception. Oh yeah, everyone at my firm is like this, but I'm not. So they can kind of get in on the conversation. I mean, to big law's credit, or maybe it's to my credit, I really enjoyed being at a big law firm. Like, I had a really good experience there. A lot of the people who I met there were really smart lawyers. Like, I got to work on interesting things, but it's like a fundamentally broken structure that just happens to attract like a lot of talent, right? But you end up, I mean, anytime you're selling your services by the hour, you're designing a system that most people will
Is
want to be
inefficient by
inefficient.
design.
Yeah, and then you look at like the way that rates have like ballooned over the last several years. If you look at like sort of the lack of folks now going to the office and getting trained, like the real reason Big Law existed, in my view, for a long time was either like you wanted to have like that specific big firm's name on a memo. You needed that name. You were buying a name. You were buying a brand.
I think it's
But
still like that.
yeah, I mean that's what it is. But it was like a funnel where you knew if you came from law school or a clerkship and you were there for like 3, 4, 5 years, you were going to be like really well trained. You were going to work your ass off. And at the end of 5 years, you could basically be slotted in at any firm. So maybe you went and you killed yourself at this big firm for 5 years, but then you could go to like a regional firm. You can kind of like go out and then you are training other people from there. So it was really the way that you would train young lawyers. And that's sort of changing now. And part of the reason why it's changing is because lawyers are not going to the office. Part of the reason why it's changing is that the inflation of legal fees has gotten so crazy that it no longer makes sense for me to go to outside counsel with the same types of work that I used to go to outside counsel with, because maybe I'm willing to spend $300 or $400 or $500 on associate time to do some research, but I'm not willing to spend $1,000 an hour for that same research. So maybe I'm doing more stuff in house. So I do think that the model is breaking down, and this is, before you even start talking about what is AI going to do to everyone's outside counsel spend in the next couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that it's more than just that. There were two posts that you wrote recently that really hit me. The first one was that one with the hourly rates, and the other one was with the law ratings. I mean, we're a small firm, and we just
I'll give you an example. Chambers is the top one, right? I'm in Los Angeles. So I get calls from all of my outside counsels saying hey, we put you as a reference for Chambers. And everyone says, none of these matter except Chambers, who really does good due diligence. So I get an email from this person at Chambers, and they say, hey, these 7 law firms all want you to rate them. Can you have a call with me and we can go through them? Here's my Calendly. And it's all UK hours. So it's I'm not going to go and talk to you at 2 a.m. So I say, happy to do it. I write a message, happy to do it. Can you pick a time that's
Here's my
accommodating
calendar.
to a Los Angeles work schedule, right? What 9 to 5 in Los Angeles? When can you do it? And the response was, oh, sorry, I'm not authorized to talk outside of my hours. If you want, I can send you an email and you can give written submissions. Okay, so now they're asking me to do pages and pages of written submissions for these law firms instead of having a 15-minute conversation because they can't get on the phone. And this is how the premier ratings of these law firms, of these law rankings work. It's completely broken. And that's the best example of it, Chambers. Everywhere else, it's basically who from my marketing team knows someone from that marketing team, and how much money in ads can I pay?
Who can afford the time and money to make all these submissions?
I'm telling you, there was one I saw last week, and I'm sometimes reluctant to talk about it because I saw one. It was top 25 fintech lawyers, and some of the people are my friends, and I like them quite a lot, and they're great legitimately great lawyers. But there were some people on that list who are so incompetent and bad that to me it makes me question the inclusion of any of these lawyers. And it shows, oh, well, this is a complete bullshit list, even though I know there are people on it that are pretty good.
How much credence do you think clients give to these ratings? Are there clients that need a lawyer and they'll just go into Chambers or into Dunn's or one of these other ratings and just search for crypto lawyer, labor lawyer, or whatever, and just take at face value whoever's ranked?
I think so. Yeah, I do. I do think that if someone sees top fintech lawyer for the last 5 years in Chambers, they're going to say, oh, there's probably something there. And those lawyers, I mean, it's not like these are just random people who are paying to, I mean, these are lawyers connected to really big firms that have marketing budgets, that have the ability to sell a whole suite of services. So, I mean, it I think is part of a larger narrative that they're trying to play, which is if you want a really good lawyer in this field, we have the folks. I just think in practice, a lot of the lawyers that end up getting ranked on these are, not someone that I would think are necessarily the best, or there's another category of lawyer in crypto that I would call the conference lawyer, which is they know a lot, they speak really well, but they're mainly drumming up business. And at the end of the day, when I hire them, I'm really hiring their junior associates or their partners, and all they are is the brand for this legal department. And that's not captured in these lists, whether the people you're hiring will actually do the work, or are they just going to be on a call and say, oh yeah, okay, we'll get a research memo on that, and then someone else is actually doing all the research.
I think that the rankings also perpetuate the lie that is, that some of these people are just not qualified because they get ranked, then they get the work, and then whether or not they're doing a good job, like nobody will know because the clients often don't know what it is that they need. And then they get ranked again because they got the work, and then they get more work, and then they get ranked again. So
Yeah. I mean, it
it's a bit
depends.
of a
It
vicious
depends on
cycle.
like what scale you're working at, right? Because I think if you're like a startup or you're like earlier on, you really don't know what you're doing, and what you're usually looking for is someone who can advise you like broadly. So you want someone who has like a broad range of understandings of the industry. They can tell you like, hey, this is how you build it. When you're at like a stage like us, we're usually looking for like hyper specialists, and the rankings are probably better at like identifying hyper specialists than they are just, oh, this is a good fintech lawyer. Fintech is such a broad space that like it's hard. But if you're actually looking for like someone who's like I don't know, like a fairly niche like a state lawyer in Florida, maybe that does a better job of like capturing it because it's regional, it's more narrow. But for the broad stuff, I don't think it works very well.
That is unfortunate. And yet, I would love to get ranked. We just issued our first submission. So
To Chambers,
yeah, they actually,
if they you should tell them to send me a calendar invite for 3 a.m. I'll say something nice.
Yeah, I never even thought about it because I thought it was something that you need to have like a huge marketing budget for. But they actually reached out for us and asked us to make a submission for cryptos.
You know what's interesting is like when I spoke to them I ended up speaking to them last year. They were more accommodating on the time, and they asked me about a bunch of law firms. And then at the end of the call, they say, is there any law firm that we haven't mentioned that you think is really great, or any lawyer that we didn't mention that you think is really great and you want to highlight? And I went, yeah, there's this one guy. Is this guy named Charles Throckmorton, actually, who I think is like a really wonderful lawyer, and he's so good, and here's all the reasons why. And I really said like he's the person you should be highlighting, and they didn't name him. So I
I'm
wonder
like,
like
oh, thank you so much.
where did that information go to?
I'll tell you, it could be that they sent him an email and he's like, screw that. I'm not gonna. Honestly,
That's
like
not.
it's they send an email. They say, okay, you have like 10 days to fill out 1,000 documents. Good luck. Not everybody, I
For sure.
recognize the value that this could bring to me, so I did it. But not everybody
Yeah.
has the time or the energy to do that.
Yeah, I don't think he probably would ignore. It's interesting. If I ever end up back in a law firm one day, I wonder if I'm going to be banned from ranking because
From the
I'm
rankings.
calling them out.
No, I also like some of the comments. Like some of the people on your post wrote like, yeah, like a top labor lawyer, 2023, never did labor law.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. It's like one of those things that everybody loves to hate on, but everybody wants to be part of. So here's to being ranked.
I hope you get it.
Thank you. Okay. So we talked about the book. We talked about crypto.com a little bit. We talked about the industry. We talked about how much you hate big law and rankings. One last thing. What are your thoughts?
I don't hate big law. I don't hate big law.
No,
it has its place, but
it's a necessary evil.
Yeah, I agree.
100%. I would also say, just for the record, that I also very much enjoyed my time at Big Law, and yet I still ridicule a lot of the things that I did now in hindsight,
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have been able to get anywhere that I am without the years that I put in there. So thank you.
I again, like it's a really good way of getting trained. Like young folks like will reach out and say like, oh, I want to go in-house right out of law school, or I want to start a company, my own law firm right out of law school. And my advice is always like, go and get trained by someone who knows what they're doing. Like work on big cases, right? Like spend a couple years doing that, and then you'll be a better lawyer no matter where you go.
Yeah. From your mouth to every intern's ears. Okay. Last thing, your newsletter. Fantastic. You highlight, all the top issues. It's really great to keep people up to date. I highly encourage everybody to get on it. If people want to continue to follow you, Justin Wales on LinkedIn, I don't think you're very active on X, but you do have a profile. The website is, remind me again, the Crypto Legal Handbook.
The cryptolegalhandbook.com. And if you just go to justinwales.com, it'll also take you there. But the newsletter is sort of interesting because I try to keep it as minimal as possible, right? Like you don't need to know everything that could possibly have happened every week. So I really try to say like, all right, what are like the most important things that you would need to know, and how do I give you this information as simply as possible? Like sometimes, like last week, the first line was, not a lot happened this week that you need to know about. Here's 3 things, but ignore it if you need to. I don't want to waste people's time.
And yet, it's a good way to keep your finger on the pulse. I told my summer intern that he has to come up with like top newsworthy crypto items daily and weekly. I haven't yet told him that he could just cheat by signing up to your newsletter. So hopefully there's no plug in the book. All right, Justin, thank you so much. This has been great.
All right, thanks, Yitzy.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Code. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and to tune in again next week for more fun and insightful conversation.